Oh, thank you. Oh. Thank you. Wow. What a great audience. Thank you for coming. Really. No. My name is Howard Zinn. And it must be a funny name. Okay. And I need to thank a number of people who are responsible for organizing this in this beautiful theater. I mean, the people associated with this theater, Beth Bloom and Victor Wong, Tomoko Umebara, and the whole staff of the Saratani Japanese American Theater, they've just been great. And also KPFK Radio, which is, you know, I guess you know KPFK. Yeah. And the producers of this whole event, Sarah Knopf, Sandra Fu, Scott Thill, and also Paul Allen Smith and Rory Daniels. And I should mention that Anthony Arnove, who don't like to mention him, but the truth is that he is really responsible for just planning and organizing and executing and just doing this whole thing. So, whether I like it or not, I have to thank him. And the proceeds, whatever proceeds there are, you may know are going to go to the NAACP fund for the hurricane relief, the Katrina relief. And I also should say something about another fund which I hope that you will support. And I don't know if Marco Rambaldo is here. You are here. Marco, good. I was wondering where you were. But Marco Rambaldo is here to tell you about, and he will be at the table outside with some literature and so on, but he's going to tell you about this organization called Emergency, which I only learned about recently, when I read a book called Green Parrots by an Italian war surgeon named Gino Strada, who for the last 10, 15 years has been treating victims of war in every war-torn area of the world. 90% of them civilians, so many of them children, hurt by landmines. And Emergency has set up medical centers and hospitals and clinics in Afghanistan and Iraq and Pakistan and all of these places in the world. And they do a fantastic job. They succeeded in Italy some years ago, a few years ago, they succeeded in Italy by carrying on a campaign of getting 1 million postcards sent to the Italian government for the Italian government to ban the production of landmines. And that did it, you see. And we could use a campaign like that in this country because, yeah, you probably know the United States has refused to sign the treaty banning landmines, which has been signed by over 100 countries. I'm sorry to say that. It's true. So I want to tell you how this came about. I guess it started with this book, A People's History of the United States, and it seems that a lot of people who read the book were particularly struck by the fact that there were a lot of quotations in it, a lot of sort of nuggets of statements by people you don't normally hear from. Because I wasn't quoting presidents and congressmen and industrialists and generals. No, I was quoting Native Americans and factory workers and women who went to work in the Lowell Mills at the age of 12 and died at the age of 25 very often. I was quoting dissenters of all sorts, socialists and anarchists and anti-war people. And so, well, several of us, by several of us I mean Anthony Arnove and I, and with the help of prodding of Dan Simon of Seven Stories Press in New York, we decided it would be a good idea to do a whole volume just of these statements, to expand on the things that were in the people's history of the United States, and to find more such words, and so we ended up with a sort of 700-page book of about 200 of these readings, and you know, they're not the kind of readings that you get in traditional textbooks, not the kind of documents you get if you. I remember going to graduate school and getting you know, documents of American history. And well, what were they? They were the speeches of presidents and laws passed by Congress and decisions of the Supreme Court. No, that's not the kind of documents we have in this book, Voices of a People's History. And Anthony and I sort of. Well, I guess we chose those statements that we thought had the most meaning for today, and all from starting with, you know, the Las Casas, you know, who blew the whistle on Columbus, going all the way up down to the present day, down to the protesters against the war in Iraq, and so our heroes in this book. The people we quote are not Andrew Jackson, but the Indians that he ordered removed from the southeastern states of the United States. Our heroes are not the war makers. Our heroes are not Theodore Roosevelt, but Mark Twain. Not Woodrow Wilson, but Helen Keller. So we put all of this together. What you're going to hear tonight is just a sampling of this book, or just a sampling of those readings. And I guess the fundamental theme that runs through all these readings is the idea that there are people all through American history, from way back down to the present day, there are people all the way through who have resisted oppression, resisted injustice, fought back, who have disobeyed authority, you see. And our premise is that when the authorities act against the interests of the people, when a government sends young people to war, when it takes the wealth of the country and wastes it on war and gives it to the rich, then disobedience is the answer, you see. And when people refuse to obey, then democracy comes alive. That's our premise. So, I want to introduce this remarkable group of actors that have agreed to come here tonight and read for you, for all of us. Starting with Viggo Mortensen. Marissa Tomei, Sandra Oh, Christina Kirk, Josh Brolin, Vanessa Martinez, Leslie Silva, Floyd, Red Crow, Westerman, Kerry, Washington, and you'll notice an empty chair there. That's for Danny Glover, who is flying at this moment from somewhere from Florida to Los Angeles, and we're hoping that he will arrive at some point in the evening. So we wanted to add a little suspense to the occasion. And then there at the end, or the beginning, is Anthony Arnaud. And he and I are going to take turns introducing the readings.
In recent years, historians have begun to challenge the idealized, romanticized picture of Christopher Columbus. The evidence for this revised view comes mainly from Bartolomé de las Casas, who witnessed the consequences of Columbus's conquest, which he describes in the following passages, first published in 1542.
I'm going to read it first in the Old Spanish, since we're in Los Angeles, which used to be part of the Spanish Empire. Doesn't matter the language, though. The voices of the people all still speak true, fortunately and unfortunately. Descubriéndose las Indias en el año de 1492, a 49 años que fueron a ellas cantidad de españoles, en la primera tierra donde entraron para hecho de poblar fue la grande y felicísima isla española, que puede ser tierra poblada en el mundo. La tierra firme que está de esta isla por lo más cercano 250 leguas, todas llenas como una colmena de gentes, en lo que hasta el año de 41 se ha descubierto que parece que puso Dios en aquellas tierras todo el golpe o la mayor cantidad de todo el linaje humano. Todas estas universas e infinitas gentes, a todo género crió Dios los más simples, sin maldades ni dobleces, obedientísimas y fidelísimas a sus señores naturales y a los cristianos a que sirven, más humildes, más pacientes, más pacíficas y quietas, sin rencillas, ni bullicios, ni rijosos, no querulosos, sin rencores, sin odios, sin desear venganzas que hay en el mundo. Son asimismo las gentes más delicadas, flacas y tiernas en complisión, y que menos pueden sufrir trabajos y que más fácilmente mueren de cualquier enfermedad. En estas ovejas mansas y de las calidades susodichas por su hacedor y criador así dotadas, entraron los españoles como lobos y tigres y leones cruelísimos de muchos días hambrientos. Y otra cosa no han hecho de 40 años a esta parte hasta hoy, y hoy en este día lo hacen sin despedazarlas, matarlas, angustiarlas, afligirlas, atormentarlas y destruirlas por las extrañas y nuevas y varias y nunca otras tales vistas ni leídas ni oídas maneras de crueldad, que habiendo en la isla española sobre 3 cuentos de ánimas que vimos, no hay hoy de los naturales de ellas 200 personas. La causa por qué han muerto y destruido tantas y tales y tan infinito número de ánimas los cristianos ha sido solamente por tener por su fin último el oro y henchirse de riquezas en muy breves días y subir a estados muy altos y sin proporción de sus personas, por la insaciable codicia y ambición que han tenido, que ha sido mayor que en el mundo ser pudo, por ser aquellas tierras tan felices y tan ricas, y las gentes tan humildes, tan pacientes y tan fáciles a sujetarlas, a las cuales no han tenido más respeto ni de ellas han hecho más cuenta ni estima, no digo que de bestias, porque pluguiera a Dios que como a bestias las hubieran tratado y estimado, pero como y menos que mierda de las plazas. De aquí comenzaron los indios a buscar maneras para echar los cristianos de sus tierras. Pusiéronse en armas, que son harto flacas y de poca ofensión, resistencia y menos defensa, Los cristianos con sus caballos y espadas y lanzas comienzan a hacer matanzas y crueldades extrañas en ellos. Entraban en los pueblos, ni dejaban niños y viejos, ni mujeres preñadas ni paridas, que no desbarrigaban y hacían pedazos, como si dieran en unos corderos metidos en sus apriscos. Hacían unas horcas largas que juntasen casi los pies a la tierra, y de 13 en 13, a honor y reverencia de nuestro Redentor y de los 12 apóstoles, poniéndoles leña y fuego, los quemaban vivos. Un cacique, el señor muy principal, que por nombre tenía Hatuey, atado a un palo decíale un religioso de San Francisco algunas cosas de Dios y de nuestra fe, el cual nunca las había jamás oído. Lo que podía bastar aquel poquillo tiempo que los verdugos le daban, y que si quería creer aquello que le decía, iría al cielo donde había gloria y eterno descanso, y si no, que había de ir al infierno a padecer perpetuos tormentos y penas. Él, pensando un poco, preguntó al religioso si iban cristianos al cielo. El religioso le respondió que sí, que iban los que eran buenos. Dijo luego el cacique, sin más pensar, que entonces él no quería ir allá, sino al infierno. Gracias. The Indies were discovered in the year 1492. 49 years have passed since the first settlers penetrated the land, the first being the large and most happy isle called Hispaniola, perhaps the most densely populated place in the world. There must be close to 200 leagues of land on this island, and all the land so far discovered is a beehive of people. It is as though God had crowded into these lands the great majority of mankind. And all of the infinite universe of humanity, these people are the most guileless, the most devoid of wickedness and duplicity, the most obedient and faithful to their native masters and to the Spanish Christians whom they serve. And because they are so weak and complacent, they are less able to endure heavy labor and soon die of no matter what malady. Yet into this sheepfold, into this land of meek outcasts, there came some Spaniards who immediately behaved like ravening wild beasts, wolves, tigers, or lions that had been starved for many days, killing, terrorizing, afflicting, torturing, and destroying the native peoples, doing all this with the strangest and most varied new methods of cruelty, never seen or heard of before, and to such a degree that this island of Hispaniola, once so populous, having a population that I estimated to be more than 3 millions, has now a population of barely 200 persons. Their reason for killing and destroying such an infinite number of souls is that the Christians have an ultimate aim, which is to acquire gold and to swell themselves with riches in a very brief time and thus rise to a high estate disproportionate to their merits. It should be kept in mind that their insatiable greed and ambition, the greatest ever seen in the world, is the cause of their villainies. And also those lands are so rich and felicitous, the native people so meek and patient, so easy to subject, that our Spaniards have no more consideration for them than beasts. No, for thanks be to God, they have treated beasts with some respect, I should say, instead like excrement on the public squares. The Indians began to seek ways to throw the Christians out of their lands. They took up arms, but their weapons were very weak and of little service in offense and still less in defense. The Christians, with their horses and swords and pikes, began to carry out massacres and strange cruelties against them. They attacked the towns and spared neither the children, nor the aged, nor pregnant women, nor women in childbed, not only stabbing them and dismembering them, but cutting them to pieces as if dealing with sheep in the slaughterhouse. They made some low, wide gallows on which they hanged victims' feet almost touched the ground, stringing up their victims in lots of 13 in memory of our Redeemer and his 12 apostles, then set burning wood at their feet and thus burned them alive. When tied to the stake, the cacique, or chieftain, Hatuey, a very important noble, was told by a Franciscan friar about the God of the Christians and of the articles of faith, and he was told what he could do in the brief time that remained to him in order to be saved and to go to heaven. The chieftain, who had never heard any of this before, and was told he would go to hell, where if he did not adopt the Christian faith, he would suffer eternal torment, asked the Franciscan friar if Christians all went to heaven. When told that they did, he said he would prefer to go to hell.
in the year 1833, when the anti-slavery movement was just beginning in the United States, an African-American woman, Maria Stewart, gave this speech.
Most of our color have been taught to stand in fear of the white man from our earliest infancy, to work as soon as they could walk, and call master before they scarce could lisp the name mother. Continual fear and laborious servitude have in some degree lessened in us that natural force and energy which belong to man. Or else, in defiance of opposition, our men before this would have nobly and boldly contended for their rights. Give the man of color an equal opportunity with the white, from the cradle to manhood, and from manhood to the grave, and you will discover the dignified statesman, the man of science, and the philosopher. But there is no such opportunity for the sons of Africa, and I fear that our powerful ones are fully determined that there never shall be. Oh, ye sons of Africa, when will your voices be heard in our legislative halls in defiance of your enemies, contending for equal rights and liberty? Is it possible that for the want of knowledge, we have labored for hundreds of years to support others and been content to receive what they chose to give us in return? Cast your eyes about. Look as far as you can see. All is owned by the lordly white, except here and there a lowly dwelling which the man of color, midst deprivations, fraud, and opposition, has been scarce able to procure. Like King Solomon, who put neither nail nor hammer to the temple, yet received the praise, so also have the white Americans gained themselves a name, like the names of the great men that are in the earth, while in reality, we have been their principal foundation and support. We have pursued the shadow. They have obtained the substance. We have performed the labor. They have received the profits. We have planted the vines. They have eaten the fruits of them.
One of the great figures of early Native American resistance to colonization was Tecumseh, a Shawnee leader. In the winter of 1811, Tecumseh gave this speech to the Osage people, rallying them to confront the colonists.
Brothers, we all belong to one family. We are children of the Great Spirit. We walk in the same path. We slake our thirst at the same spring. Brothers, we are friends. We must assist each other to bear our burdens. The blood of many our fathers and brothers run like water on the ground. To satisfy the avarice of the white man, we ourselves are threatened with the great evil. Nothing will pacify them but the destruction of all the red men. Brothers, when the white man first set foot on our grounds, they were hungry. They had no place on which to spread their blankets or to kindle their fires. They were feeble. They could do nothing for themselves. Our Father commiserated their distress and shared freely with them whatever the Great Spirit had given to his red children. They gave him food when hungry, medicine when sick, spread skins for the sheep, spread skins for them to sleep on, and gave them grounds that they might hunt and raise corn. Brothers, The white people are like poisonous serpents. When chilled, they are feeble and harmless. But invigorate them with warmth, and they will sting their benefactors to death. White people come among us feeble, and now we made them strong. They wish to kill us or drive us back, as they would wolves and panthers. Brothers, the white men are not friends to the Indians. At first, they only asked for land sufficient for a wigwam. Now, nothing will satisfy them but the whole of our hunting grounds, from the rising sun to the setting sun. Brothers, who are the white people that we should fear them? They cannot run fast, are good marks to shoot at. They are only men. Our fathers have killed many of them. We will stain the earth with red blood. Brothers, we must be united. We must smoke the same pipe. We must fight each other's battles. And more than all, we must love the Great Spirit. He is for us. He will destroy the enemies and make all his red children happy.
Yeah. When we learn about the American Revolution in our schools, generally it's as if everybody was sort of one great, united, patriotic family fighting against the English. It wasn't that way at all. There was class conflict in the colonies, class conflict in the Revolution. The privates in the army were not treated like the officers. And here you have one of these privates, Joseph Plum Martin, who talks about what he and his fellow soldiers endured.
When those who engaged to serve during the war enlisted, they were promised 100 acres of land each, which was to be in their or the adjoining states. When the country had drained the last drop of service it could screw out of the poor soldiers, they were turned adrift, like old, worn-out horses, and nothing said about land to pasture them upon. Congress did indeed appropriate lands under the denomination of soldiers' lands in Ohio State or some state or a future state, but no care was taken that the soldiers should get them. The truth was, no one cared for them. The country was served and faithfully served, and that was all that was deemed necessary. It was, soldiers, look to yourselves. We want no more of you. We were also promised $6 2/3 to be paid us monthly. And how did we fare in this particular? Why, as we did in every other. I received the $1 2/3 till, if I remember rightly, the month of August 1777, when paying ceased. And what was $6.67 of this continental currency, as it was called, worth? It was scarcely enough to procure a man a dinner. It is provoking to think the country was rigorous in exacting my compliance to my engagements, but equally careless in performing her contracts with me. And why so? Because she had all the power in her own hands, and I had none. Such things ought not to be. You know, many murmur now at the apparent good fortune of the poor soldiers, and many I have myself seen vile enough to say that they never deserved such favor from our country. The only wish that I would bestow upon such hard-hearted wretches is that they might be compelled to go through just such sufferings and privations as that army did. And then, if they did not sing a different tune, I should miss my guess. I hope I shall one day find land enough to lay my bones in. If I chance to die in a civilized country, none will deny me that. A dead body never begs a grave. Thanks for that.
The lands of the Nez Perce Indians stretch from Oregon to Idaho, but after the gold rush in the 1860s, the federal government seized millions of acres, crowding them into a small part of their former territories. Chief Joseph led the resistance to the colonization of Nez Perce lands, but his people came under fierce attack, and in 1877, he and his followers were defeated. Joseph was sent to the Indian Territories in Oklahoma, where he continued to speak out against the crimes of the U.S. government, as he did during a visit to Washington, D.C. in 1879, as he recalls in this speech.
At last I was granted permission to come to Washington and bring my friend Yellow Bull and our interpreter with me. I'm glad I came. I have shaken hands with many good friends. But there are some things I want to know which no one seems to be able to explain. I cannot understand how the government sends a man to fight us, as it did General Miles, then he breaks his word. Such a government has something wrong with it. I cannot understand why so many chiefs are allowed to talk so many different ways and promise so many different things. I have seen the Great Spirit and many other law chiefs, and they all say they are my friends and that I shall have justice. But while all their mouths talk right, I do not understand why nothing is done for my people. I have heard and talk, but nothing seems is done. Words do not pay for my dead people. They do not pay for my country now overrun by white men. They do not protect my father's grave. They do not pay for the horses and cattle. Good words do not give me back my children. Good words will not make the promise of your war chief, General Miles. Good words will not give my people good health and stop them from dying. Good words will not give my people a home where they can live in peace and take care of themselves. I am tired of talk that comes to nothing. It makes my heart sick when I remember all the good words and all the broken promises. There has been too much talking by men who had no right to talk. If the white man wants to live in peace with the Indian, he can live in peace. There need be no trouble. Treat all men alike, give them the same laws, give them all an even chance to live and grow. All men are made by the same Great Spirit Chief. They all are brothers. If you tie a horse to a stake, do you expect he will grow fat? If you pin an Indian up in a small spot of earth and compel him to stay there, he will not be contented, nor will he grow and prosper. I have asked some of the great white chiefs where they get their authority to say to the Indian that he shall stay in one place, while he sees white men going where they please. They cannot tell me. When I think of our condition, my heart is heavy. I see men of my own race treated as outlaws and driven from country to country or shot down like animals. I only ask the government to be treated as all other men are treated. We only ask an even chance to live as other men live. We ask to be recognized as men. We ask at the same time the same law shall work alike on all men. If an Indian breaks the law, punish him by the law. If a white man breaks the law, punish him also. Let me be a free man, free to travel, free to stop, free to work, free to trade where I choose, free to choose my own teachers, free to follow the religion of my fathers, free to talk, think, and act for myself. And I will obey every law to submit to the penalty. Whenever the white man treats the Indian as they treat each other, then we shall have no more wars. We shall be all alike, brothers of one father and mother, one sky above us, and one country around us, and one government for all. Then the Great Spirit who rules above will smile upon this land and send the rain to wash out the bloody spots made by brothers' hands upon the face of the earth.
In the early part of the 19th century, Boston capitalists began building textile mills in Lowell, Massachusetts. And they recruited young women from rural New England as their labor force. And they assumed these young women would be docile and easily managed, but instead, these young women in the Lowell mills formed reading circles. They organized to demand their rights as laborers and as women. They agitated for better workplace conditions. Here, Harriet Hanson Robinson, who started work in the mills when she was only 10, recounts a strike of the Lowell women.
At the time the Lowell cotton mills were started, the factory girl was the lowest among women. In England and in France, particularly, great injustice had been done to her real character. She was represented as subjected to influences that could not fail to destroy her purity and self-respect. In the eyes of her overseer, she was but a brute, a slave, to be beaten, pinched, and pushed about. One of the first strikes of cotton factory operators that ever took place in this country was in Lowell in October 1836, when it was announced that wages were to be cut down. Great indignation was felt, and it was decided to strike en masse. This was done. The mills were shut down, and the girls went in procession from their several corporations down to the Grove on Chapel Hill and listened to incendiary speeches from early labor reformers. One of the girls stood on a pump and gave vent to the feelings of her companions in a neat speech, declaring that it was their duty to resist all attempts at cutting down the wages. This was the first time a woman had spoken in public in Lowell, and the event caused surprise and consternation amongst her audience. Cutting down the wages was not their only grievance, nor the only cause of this strike. Hitherto, the corporations had paid 25 cents a week towards the board of each operative, and now it was their purpose to have the girls pay the sum. And this, in addition to the cut wages, would make a difference of at least $1 a week. It was estimated that as many as 1,200 or 1,500 girls turned out and walked in procession through the streets. My own recollection of this first strike, or turnout as it was called, is very vivid. I worked in a lower room where I had heard the proposed strike fully, if not vehemently, discussed. I had been an ardent listener to what was said against this attempt at oppression on the part of the corporation, and naturally I took sides with the strikers. When the day came on which the girls were to turn out, those in the upper rooms started first. So many of them left that our mill was at once shut down. Then, when the girls in my room stood, irresolute, uncertain what to do, asking each other, would you or shall we turn out? And not one of them having the courage to lead off. I, who began to think they would not go out after all their talk, became impatient and started on ahead, saying with childish bravado, I don't care what you do, I'm going to turn out, whether anyone else does or not. And I marched out. And I was followed by the others. As I looked back at the long line that followed me, I was more proud than I had ever been at any success I may have achieved.
In 1848, the North Star, which was the newspaper of the abolitionist movement, edited by Frederick Douglass, penned this editorial denouncing the U.S. designs on Mexico.
From aught that appears in the present position and movements of the executive and cabinet, the proceedings of either branch of the National Congress, the several state legislatures, North and South, the spirit of the public press, slight hope can rationally be predicated of a very speedy termination of the present disgraceful, cruel, and iniquitous war with our sister republic. Mexico seems a doomed victim to Anglo-Saxon cupidity and love of dominion. The determination of our slave-holding president to prosecute the war and the probability of his success in wringing from the people men and money to carry it on is made evident rather than doubtful by the puny opposition arrayed against him. No politician of any considerable distinction or eminence seems willing to hazard his popularity with his party or stem the fierce current of executive influence by an open and unqualified disapprobation of the war. None seem willing to take their stand for peace at all risks, and all seem willing that the war should be carried on in some form or other. We have no preference for parties regarding the slave-holding crusade. The one is as bad as the other. The friends of peace have nothing to hope from either. The Democrats claim the credit of commencing, and the Whigs monopolize the glory of voting supplies and carrying on the war, branding the war as dishonorably commenced, yet boldly persisting in pressing it on. Grasping ambition, tyrannical usurpation, atrocious aggression, cruel and haughty pride spread and pervade the land. The curse is upon us. The plague is abroad. A general outcry is heard. Vigorous prosecution of the war. Mexico must be humbled. Conquer a peace, war forced upon us, national honor, the whole of Mexico, our destiny, this continent, Anglo-Saxon blood, more territory, free institutions, our country. The taste of human blood and the smell of powder seem to have extinguished the senses, seared the conscience, and subverted the reason of the people to a degree that may well induce the gloomy apprehension that our nation has fully entered her downward career, and yielded herself up to the revolting idea of battle and blood. Unavailing as her voice may be, we wish to warn our fellow countrymen that they may follow the course which they have marked out for themselves. No barrier may be sufficient to obstruct them. They may accomplish all they desire. Mexico may fall before them. She may be conquered and subdued. Her government may be annihilated. But so sure as there is a God of justice, we shall not go unpunished. The penalty is certain. We cannot escape. A terrible retribution awaits us. We beseech our countrymen to leave off this horrid conflict, abandon their murderous plans, and forsake the way of blood. Our country may yet be saved. Let the press, the pulpit, the church, the people at large unite at once and let petitions flood the halls of Congress by the million, asking for the instant recall of our forces from Mexico. This may not save us, but it is our only hope.
Abraham Lincoln is known as the great emancipator, but if there's any white man who deserves the credit for bringing the issue of slavery in an exciting way before the nation, it's John Brown. John Brown. He was found guilty of trying to seize the arsenal at Harper's Ferry. He's brought to trial, found guilty of treason, and 1 month before his execution, he addressed a courtroom in Charlestown, West Virginia.
I have, may it please the court, a few words to say. In the first place, I deny everything. But what I have all along admitted, the design on my part to free the slaves. I intended certainly to have made a clear thing of that matter, as I did last winter when I went into Missouri, and there took slaves without the snapping of a gun on either side, moved them through the country, and finally left them in Canada. I designed to have done the same thing again on a much, much larger scale. That was all I intended. I never did intend murder or treason or the destruction of property or to excite or incite slaves into rebellion or to make insurrection. And I have another objection, and that is, it is unjust that I should suffer such a penalty. Had I interfered in the matter which I admit, and which I admit has been fairly proved, had I so interfered in behalf of the rich, the powerful, the intelligent, the so-called great, or in behalf of any of their friends, either father, mother, brother, sister, wife, or children, or any of that class, and suffered and sacrificed what I have in this interference, it would have been all right. And every man in this court would have deemed it an act worthy of reward rather than punishment. This court acknowledges, I suppose, the validity of the law of God. I see a book kissed here, which I suppose it to be the Bible, or at least the New Testament. That teaches me that whatsoever I would that men should do unto me, I should do even so to them. It teaches me further to remember them that they are in bonds as bound with them. I endeavor to act up to that instruction. I say I am yet too young to understand that God is any respecter of persons. I believe that to have interfered as I have done, as I have always freely admitted that I have done, in behalf of his despised poor was not wrong, but right. Now, if it is deemed necessary that I should forfeit my life for the furtherance of the ends of justice, and mingle my blood further with the blood of my children and with the blood of millions in this slave country whose rights are disregarded by wicked, cruel, and unjust enactments, I submit, so let it be done.
Here, the black abolitionist Sojourner Truth, who was herself freed from slavery in 1827, speaks to a gathering of feminists in Akron, Ohio in 1851.
Well, children, where there is so much racket, there must be something out of kilter. I think that twixt the Negroes of the South and the women at the North, all talking about rights, the white man will be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages, lifted over ditches, and to have the best place everywhere. Huh. Nobody ever helps me into carriages, or over mud puddles, or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most all sold off to slavery. And when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? Then they talk about this thing in the head. What's this they call it? Intellect. That's right, honey. Well, what's that got to do with women's rights or Negroes' rights? If my cup won't hold but a pint and yours holds a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to let me have my little half measure full? Then that little man there in the black, he says women can't have much rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman. Well, where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man had nothing to do with him. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, these women together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. And now they's asking to do it. The men better let them.
In November 1872, Susan B. Anthony was one of 14 women who defied the law to cast a ballot in the presidential election. She was arrested for, quote, knowingly voting without having a lawful right to vote, unquote. And on June 18, 1873, she was found guilty. The next day, when her lawyer appealed her verdict, she addressed the court in response to a question from the judge.
Has the prisoner anything to say why sentence shall not be pronounced?
Yes, Your Honor, I have many things to say. For in your ordered verdict of guilty, you have trampled underfoot every vital principle of our government. My natural rights, my civil rights, my political rights, my judicial rights are all alike ignored. Robbed of the fundamental privilege of citizenship, I am degraded from the status of a citizen to that of a subject. And not only myself individually, but all of my sex are, by Your Honor's verdict, doomed to political subjection under this so-called Republican form of government.
The court cannot listen to a rehearsal of argument which the prisoner's counsel has already consumed 3 hours in presenting.
May it please Your Honor, I am not arguing the question, but simply stating the reasons why sentence cannot, in justice, be pronounced against me. Your denial of my citizens' right to vote is the denial of my right of consent as one of the governed, the denial of my right of representation as one of the taxed, the denial of my right to a trial by a jury of my peers as an offender against law, therefore the denial of my sacred right to life, liberty, property, and
the court cannot allow the prisoner to go on.
But Your Honor will not deny me this one and only poor privilege of protest against this high-handed outrage upon my citizens' rights.
The court must insist the prisoner has been tried according to the established forms of law.
Yes, Your Honor, but by forms of law all made by men, interpreted by men, administered by men, in favor of men, and against women. And hence, Your Honor's ordered verdict of guilty against a United States citizen for the exercise of the citizen's right to vote, simply because that citizen was a woman and not a man. But yesterday, the same man-made forms of law declared it a crime, punishable with a $1,000 fine and 6 months imprisonment to give a cup of cold water, a crust of bread, or a night's shelter to a panting fugitive tracking his way to Canada. And every man or woman in whose veins coursed a drop of human sympathy violated that wicked law, reckless of consequences, and was justified in doing so. As then the slaves who got their freedom had to take it over or under or through the unjust forms of law, precisely so now must women take it to get right to a voice in this government. And I have taken mine and mean to take it at every opportunity.
The court must insist the sentence of the court is that you pay a fine of $100 and the costs of the prosecution.
May it please Your Honor, I will never pay $1 of your unjust penalty. All the stock in trade I possess is a debt of $10,000 incurred by publishing my paper, The Revolution, the sole object of which was to educate all women to do precisely as I have done, rebel against your man-made, unjust, unconstitutional forms of law which tax, fine, imprison, and hang women, all while denying them the right of representation in the government. And I will work on with might and main to pay every dollar of that honest debt, but not a penny shall go to this unjust claim. And I shall earnestly and persistently continue to urge all women to the practical recognition of the old revolutionary maxim, resistance to tyranny is obedience to God.